Greetings, welcome back to my studio. I'm resuming the painting of the figure here, the nude that I started in earlier videos, and I'm at a intermediary stage here now where I'm going to be working on the midtones or halftones. They're somewhere in between the darks and the lights. And in this painting I'm continuing on this scheme, this plan that I have that painters often do, where I started with masking the darks, unifying the darks, and gradually working up the value scale, going from the darkest darks to the lightest lights. And as I said, I sometimes make variations in that and work back and forth, but generally that's the way I'm progressing here, is going from the darkest darks to the lightest lights. I wanted to point out a couple of things with a composition that has kind of a classic compositional arrangement here. It's in a triangle, which I often use, and it can also be described as a pyramidal type of composition. And basically there's a sort of a loose pyramid here, and it's often used in Renaissance paintings, and Raphael was one of the main exponents. And it gives it kind of a stability and a structure and an inherent strength. And I have these warm tones. As I said, the study was cooler tones, but this is mostly warmer tones. And I'm going to go back into the darks just a little bit here, because it's a process of going back and forth from the general to the specific. And with this arm here, one of the things that defines it, it kind of switches though from the figure-ground relationship. In other words, right here the arm is defined by the fact that it's a light against a dark, and then it gradually flips, switches around up here as it goes northward, as it goes up. So once it gets up here, it switches a little bit. There's a lot of subtle modeling that remains to be done. I'm working just sort of generally and roughly here right now. But this one here can also be accentuated a little bit more. I'm making that a little bit darker. And as I said, I'm working with just kind of a dry brush. In other words, there's not a lot of thinner in it. It's mostly just paint without a lot of mineral spirits or other thinner. Okay, so now I want to move to, there's this reflected light in the model's torso and on up into her head. It's a really beautiful warm light. So I think I have this set up so you can see the palette here. So I'm mixing these colors. I'm using a little bit of Naples yellow, and that's cadmium orange, and a little bit of yellow ochre, and some of this white. I'm thinking that's going to be much too light, so I'm going to add some chromium oxide green in there to darken it. Let's see what this looks like. We'll test it out. It's a little too dark. I think I can go a little bit lighter. Okay. Yes, I think that's going to be just about right. So as I just said, there's going to be a lot of finesse that's yet to come. By that I mean articulating the subtleties of shading and form and so forth. And I'm going quite quickly here now, which is a good thing to do, just to make general statements. And the color of the tint of the canvas was chosen somewhat in advance. Oftentimes I'll use a neutral gray, but in this particular instance I wanted to use a color that worked into the warm color scheme. So this color of the canvas here and throughout is this sort of raw sienna type of color. So these are what the mid-tones or the half-tones, and the others are either the darks or an intermediary type of half-tone. So this color that I'm doing here now is reflected right here. It's going to be pure, almost pure white from a backlight window that was illuminating the side of her face over here and her legs and knees. And I have not yet put a coat of varnish on this painting yet. I usually wait till I get most of the surface covered, and then I'll put a layer of either liquin or Utrecht glazing medium, and that will really bring out the color and make it nice and unified. But as I progress, I'll be taking more time to articulate these forms. As I said, I'm working just kind of very generally right now for the sake of demonstration to show you about working up the value scale. And we have to keep in mind where the light is coming from at all times. It's coming from this direction, but it's being bounced back into her torso here. And also her arm on this side is going to catch a lot of nice light here. It's really going to bring this arm out. And then right here where I'm painting right now, there's some nice little changes of angles that are going to be happening, and subtleties of the form of her forearm. And that'll be an area that will need to be softened to a great extent. When I come back in. Okay. So softening these edges will help to make the form rounded. And we have to be careful where edges are hard and where they're soft. But generally speaking, with a figure, most of the edges are going to be soft, especially at the transition points. For example, right here is a transition point between the mid-tone and the shadow of her arm. So that'll be an area that we want to go back into space quite a bit. And as far as edges go, another thing is right up in here, this edge gets lost. I talked about that in the initial video of lost edges and found edges. I'm going to turn off the light here, incandescent light, just so you can see it perhaps a little bit better in this just natural light here. And as far as the lost edges go, up here in her head, I'm mixing some burnt sienna and some phthalo green here. And I think I'm going to go a little bit lighter there. But in other words, there's no line between the back of her head and the background. It's an example of a lost edge, and it adds kind of a mystery and unifies the darks too, as it were. varnish will really bring out these, I know they're probably not registering, but there's a lot of variation in the background here of various colors between the warm and the cooler color. Okay. That's about all I'm going to do for the sake of a demonstration, but I think that shows you the process that I'm using of going from the darks working up to the midtones, and then the next stage that I'll be going to will be the lights. All of these areas here and here will be really light, almost pure white, because as I said, there was a window that was shining light on the model. Okay, so for now that's how it's going, and thanks again for your attention.